The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the training grounds as wiped sweat from his brow. He had been a Marine sniper instructor for 8 years, and he thought he had seen everything. The M82A1 rifle lay on the bench beside him, its massive .50 caliber frame gleaming in the harsh light. Today would be different, though he didn't know it yet. Sarah stepped out of the transport vehicle, her combat boots hitting the sandy ground with purpose. She was smaller than most of the recruits had trained, standing barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, but there was something in her eyes that caught his attention immediately. While other new arrivals looked around nervously or tried to appear tough, Sarah simply observed everything with calm intensity. "You must be," said, approaching her with a clipboard containing her file. "I'm Sergeant, your instructor for advanced marksmanship training." Sarah nodded respectfully. "Yes, Sergeant, ready to begin when you are." Glanced at her paperwork again, straight from basic training with exceptional scores in every category. No prior shooting experience beyond the standard military training. On paper, she looked promising but unremarkable. He had trained dozens like her before. "Tell me, why do you want sniper training?" asked as they walked toward the shooting range. It was a question he asked every recruit, partly to gauge their motivation and partly to weed out those who had watched too many movies. "I want to protect people, Sergeant," Sarah replied without hesitation. "My younger brother was killed in a school shooting 3 years ago. The police couldn't get a clear shot because they didn't have the right equipment or training. I don't want other families to go through what mine did." Stopped walking. In 8 years of training snipers, he had heard many reasons. Some wanted glory, others craved the challenge, and a few genuinely wanted to serve their country. But Sarah's answer was different. It was personal, painful, and completely honest. "I'm sorry for your loss," said quietly. "But you should know that military sniping is very different from civilian law enforcement. We're talking about combat situations, long-range targets, and split-second decisions that can change the course of battles." Sarah looked directly at him. "I understand, Sergeant, but precision shooting is precision shooting. Whether it's saving hostages or protecting fellow soldiers, the fundamentals remain the same. I want to be the person others can count on when everything depends on one perfect shot." Over the next 2 weeks, put Sarah through the standard training routine. She started with smaller caliber rifles, learning breathing techniques, trigger control, and windage calculations. Her progress was steady but not spectacular. She made the same mistakes most recruits made, struggled with the same concepts, and needed the same corrections. What set Sarah apart wasn't her natural talent but her relentless dedication to improvement. While other trainees relaxed during breaks, Sarah practiced her breathing exercises. When others complained about the difficulty of calculating bullet drop over long distances, Sarah stayed after hours studying ballistics charts. She asked thoughtful questions and never made the same mistake twice. Found himself paying closer attention to her progress than usual. There was something about her quiet determination that reminded him why he had become a sniper in the first place. She approached each lesson with the seriousness of someone who understood that these skills weren't just for personal achievement, but for protecting lives. On a particularly hot Tuesday morning, decided to introduce the trainees to the M82A1. The massive anti-material rifle was intimidating even to experienced shooters. Its .50 caliber rounds could disable vehicles, penetrate light armor, and reach targets at distances exceeding a mile. Most recruits were nervous when they first encountered it. "This is the 50 cal, announced to the group of 6 trainees. "It weighs 30 pounds, fires rounds that cost about $5 each, and has enough recoil to knock you flat if you're not prepared. Who wants to go first?" The usual eager volunteers stepped forward, mostly the larger male recruits who thought their size would help them handle the powerful rifle. Worked with each of them, teaching proper positioning and explaining how the rifle's recoil management system worked. Results were mixed at best. The weapon's size and power seemed to intimidate even the most confident trainees. Sarah waited patiently as each of her fellow trainees took their turn. She watched carefully, noting their mistakes and successes. When finally called her name, she approached with the same calm demeanor she brought to everything else. "This rifle is probably heavier than you are," one of the other trainees joked, earning some nervous laughter from the group. Sarah smiled but didn't respond. She had learned early in her military career that actions spoke louder than words. She positioned herself behind the massive rifle, adjusting the bipod legs and settling into a comfortable shooting position. Knelt beside her, expecting to provide the same detailed guidance he had given the others. The recoil is significant, so make sure your shoulder is firmly. "I've got it, Sergeant," Sarah interrupted politely. "May I take the shot?" Paused, surprised by her confidence. Most recruits needed extensive coaching before attempting their first shot with the "Go ahead, but remember to." The rifle roared, its distinctive boom echoing across the desert. The target, positioned 800 yards downrange, showed a clean hit in the H-ring. Not perfect, but impressive for a first shot with such a powerful weapon. "Good shot," said, genuinely surprised. "Let's see if you can repeat it." Sarah cycled the bolt smoothly, loaded another round, and settled back into position. This time, she took slightly longer to aim, making minute adjustments to her scope. The second shot rang out, and through his spotting scope, watched the bullet strike the target's 7-ring. Sarah murmured, frowning slightly. Wind picked up from the east, didn't compensate enough. Looked at her sharply. Reading wind conditions was an advanced skill that took most snipers months to master. Sarah had been training for only 2 weeks, yet she had correctly identified the reason for her slightly off-target shot. For the third shot, Sarah made a small adjustment to her scope's windage dial. When she fired, the bullet struck the target's 9-ring, nearly dead center. The other trainees had grown quiet, realizing they were witnessing something unusual. "Where did you learn to read wind like that?" asked as Sarah cleared the rifle and made it safe. "I didn't learn it anywhere specifically," Sarah replied. "But I grew up on a farm in Montana, spent a lot of time outdoors, hunting with my father. You learn to pay attention to things like wind direction and air temperature when you're trying to put food on the table." Nodded, but something didn't add up. Sarah's file indicated no prior shooting experience beyond basic military training. Her performance with the suggested otherwise. Either she was naturally gifted beyond anything he had encountered, or there was more to her background than her official records showed. Over the following days, watched Sarah more carefully. Her improvement rate was extraordinary. Skills that typically took weeks to develop, she mastered in days. Her understanding of ballistics seemed intuitive rather than learned. Most remarkably, she appeared completely unaffected by the pressure and intensity that caused other trainees to make mistakes. On Friday of that week, decided to test Sarah's abilities more thoroughly. He set up targets at various distances, from 600 yards to 1,200 yards, and included different wind conditions and elevation changes. It was a challenging course that would test even experienced snipers. "This is beyond the standard curriculum," told Sarah as they prepared for the exercise. "I'm curious to see how you handle variable conditions." Sarah nodded and took her position behind the first target was at 600 yards with a crosswind. She studied the conditions carefully, made her scope adjustments, and fired. Clean hit in the 9-ring. The second target at 800 yards with an uphill angle received similar treatment. When they reached the 1,200-yard target, expected to see her first real failure. At that distance, factors like bullet drop, wind drift, and atmospheric pressure became critical. Few recruits could successfully engage targets at such extreme range without extensive experience. Sarah spent nearly 2 minutes studying the target through her scope, occasionally glancing at the wind flag's position downrange. She made several small adjustments to her scope, checked her range card, and finally settled into her final shooting position. The shot seemed to take forever to reach the target. When it finally struck, couldn't believe what he saw through his spotting scope. The bullet had hit the target's X-ring, the small center circle that marked a perfect score. "How?" asked, not bothering to hide his amazement. Sarah looked up from the rifle with a slight smile. "Lucky shot, Sergeant." But knew better. Luck didn't account for the precision he had just witnessed. There was something about Sarah that explanation, and he was determined to figure out what it was. That evening, called his supervisor, Captain Williams, to discuss Sarah's extraordinary performance. They agreed that she deserved accelerated training and access to advanced courses typically reserved for seasoned snipers. As drove home that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah was unlike any trainee he had ever encountered. Her skills seemed to exceed her experience, her composure was unnatural for someone so new to military life, and her understanding of advanced concepts was almost supernatural. What didn't know was that Sarah harbored a secret that would soon change everything he thought he knew about marksmanship training. A secret that would challenge his assumptions about natural talent, dedication, and the true meaning of precision shooting. The next phase of her training would reveal abilities that would leave even a veteran instructor speechless and forced to reconsider everything he believed about what was possible with a rifle in the right hands. 3 weeks into Sarah's advanced training, received orders that would change everything. Captain Williams had arranged for Sarah to undergo evaluation by Master Sergeant Hayes, a legendary sniper instructor known throughout the military for her exceptional standards and keen eye for talent. Master Sergeant Hayes arrived on a Monday morning with a reputation that preceded her. She had served 3 combat tours, held multiple marksmanship records, and had trained some of the military's most elite snipers. Her presence at the training facility meant someone very high up the chain of command was taking notice of Sarah's abilities. Hayes said briskly as she approached near the equipment shed, "I've heard interesting things about your recruit. Show me what she can do." Felt nervous presenting Sarah to such a distinguished instructor. Over the past weeks, Sarah's performance had continued to exceed all expectations, but Master Sergeant Hayes had seen truly exceptional shooters from around the world. Would Sarah's abilities seem as remarkable to someone of Hayes' caliber? "Sarah, you're up," called. "Master Sergeant Hayes wants to observe your shooting." Sarah approached with her characteristic calm demeanor, showing no signs of intimidation at meeting such a senior instructor. She saluted respectfully and waited for instructions. Hayes studied Sarah carefully, taking in everything from her posture to her equipment handling. "I understand you've been making quite an impression with the... Let's see what you can do with something a bit more challenging." Hayes gestured toward a rifle had never seen before. It was clearly custom-built, with specialized optics and modifications that spoke of serious craftsmanship. "This is my personal rifle," Hayes explained. "Custom .338 Magnum hand-loaded rounds, specialized scope. I've taken this system to its limits in competition and combat. Think you can handle it?" Most recruits would have been overwhelmed by the opportunity to use such an advanced weapon system. Sarah simply nodded and began examining the rifle with professional interest, checking the action, familiarizing herself with the scope controls, and testing the trigger pull. "What's the longest shot you've attempted?" Hayes asked as Sarah prepared the rifle. 1,200 yards with the Master Sergeant," Sarah replied. "Clean hit." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Impressive. Today we'll try 1,500 yards. Think that's possible?" Sarah looked downrange at the target barely visible in the distance. At that range, numerous factors would affect bullet flight. Temperature, humidity, air pressure, wind speed, and direction at multiple levels, even the rotation of the Earth would influence the shot's accuracy. It was a distance that challenged even expert snipers. "I'd like to try, Master Sergeant," Sarah said simply. Hayes set up her spotting scope while Sarah studied the conditions. The wind was variable, shifting from left to right in unpredictable patterns. The temperature differential between the firing position and the target area would cause the bullet to climb slightly. The extreme range meant bullet drop would be measured in feet rather than inches. Sarah spent 10 minutes observing the wind flags and studying atmospheric conditions. She consulted range cards, made calculations on a small notebook, and repeatedly checked her scope settings. Finally, she settled into position behind the custom rifle. Through his own spotting scope, watched Sarah's preparation with growing amazement. Her movements were methodical and precise, showing none of the nervousness or uncertainty typical of someone attempting such an extreme shot. She appeared completely focused, as if the distance and difficulty meant nothing to her. The shot, when it came, seemed to echo forever across the desert. Tracked the bullet's flight path through his scope, watching for the impact that seemed to take an eternity. When the bullet finally struck the target, he couldn't believe what he saw. "Hit," Hayes called out calmly, though detected surprise in her voice. "Center mass, excellent shooting." But Sarah wasn't finished. Without being asked, she cycled the bolt and prepared for a second shot. This time, her preparation was even more deliberate. She made minute adjustments to her scope, recalculated wind conditions, and settled into an even steadier position. The second shot was even more impressive than the first. Through the spotting scope, watched the bullet strike the target's center ring with devastating precision. At 1,500 yards, such accuracy was nearly impossible to achieve consistently. Hayes lowered her spotting scope and stared at Sarah with an expression had never seen on the veteran instructor's face. It was a mixture of respect, bewilderment, and something approaching awe. "Where exactly did you learn to shoot like that?" Hayes asked directly. Sarah cleared the rifle and made it safe before responding. "My grandfather taught me the basics when I was young, Master Sergeant. The rest I've learned through practice and study." Hayes exchanged a meaningful look with. They both knew that natural talent combined with basic instruction didn't produce the level of skill they had just witnessed. Sarah's abilities suggested extensive training and experience that wasn't reflected in her official records. "Tell me about your grandfather," Hayes said, settling onto a nearby bench and indicating that Sarah should join her. Sarah sat down, her expression becoming more thoughtful. "He was a Marine sniper in Vietnam, Master Sergeant, served with the 3rd Marine Division. He never talked much about the war, but he taught me to shoot when I was 8 years old. Said precision and patience were the most important skills anyone could learn." Hayes nodded slowly. "What was your grandfather's name?" "Thomas, Master Sergeant. He passed away 5 years ago." The expression on Hayes' face changed dramatically. She turned to with wide eyes before looking back at Sarah. "Staff Sergeant Thomas, the Tom who held the long-range record in Vietnam for over 3 years." Sarah's composure cracked slightly for the first time since had met her. "You knew my grandfather?" Hayes leaned back, shaking her head in amazement. "Knew him? Your grandfather was a legend. I studied his techniques when I was coming up through sniper school. His precision shooting methods are still taught in advanced courses. Tom was one of the finest military marksmen who ever lived." Felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Sarah's extraordinary abilities suddenly made sense. She hadn't just received basic instruction from her grandfather. She had been trained by one of the military's most accomplished snipers. "He made me promise never to mention his military service unless directly asked," Sarah explained. "Said his war experiences were his business, not mine, but he spent summers teaching me everything he knew about shooting. Ballistics, wind reading, breathing techniques, mental preparation. He said these skills might save my life someday." Hayes stood up and began packing, clearly processing this new information. "This changes everything. Your grandfather's training explains your abilities, but it also means you've been seriously underutilized in the standard program." Over the next hour, Hayes conducted an extensive interview with Sarah about her training background. It became clear that Thomas had provided his granddaughter with instruction equivalent to advanced military sniper school. Sarah had learned complex ballistics calculations, advanced shooting positions, camouflage and concealment techniques, and psychological preparation methods used by elite military marksmen. "Why didn't you mention this in your initial interviews?" asked. Sarah shrugged. "Grandfather always said to let my shooting speak for itself. He said talking about training was less important than demonstrating ability. Besides, I wasn't sure how relevant his old Vietnam-era techniques would be to modern military operations." Hayes laughed, the first time had seen the stern instructor display such emotion. "Vietnam-era techniques? Your grandfather's methods were decades ahead of their time. Some of the innovations he developed are just now being incorporated into current training programs." That afternoon, Hayes made several phone calls to higher command. Could only hear one side of the conversations, but it was clear that Sarah's true background was causing significant interest among senior officers. Words like exceptional, unprecedented, and immediate advancement featured prominently in Hayes' discussions. By evening, new orders had arrived. Sarah would be transferred immediately to the military's most advanced sniper program, normally reserved for operators with years of combat experience. She would skip several levels of training and go directly to courses designed for the military's elite marksmen. "This is happening faster than usual," told Sarah as they prepared her transfer paperwork. "Advanced courses, specialized units, access to experimental equipment. Are you ready for this level of responsibility?" Sarah considered the question carefully before answering. "Sergeant, my grandfather used to tell me that exceptional ability creates exceptional obligation. He said if you can do something better than others, you have a duty to use that skill in service of something larger than yourself." Nodded, understanding for the first time the weight Sarah carried. Her abilities weren't just personal achievements. They represented a legacy passed down from one of the military's finest marksmen and a responsibility to honor that inheritance through service. as Sarah packed her equipment that evening, reflected on everything he had witnessed over the past month. He had trained hundreds of snipers during his career, but Sarah represented something unique. Her combination of inherited knowledge, natural ability, and personal dedication created a marksman of extraordinary capability. What neither nor Hayes could predict was how Sarah's abilities would soon be tested in ways that would challenge not only her shooting skills, but her character, judgment, and commitment to the principles her grandfather had taught her. The advanced training program waiting for Sarah would push her to limits she had never imagined and reveal depths of skill that would earn her a place among the military's most elite marksmen. But first, she would face trials that would test whether Thomas's granddaughter possessed not only his remarkable shooting ability, but also his strength of character and unwavering moral compass. The legend of Sarah was about to begin, though she remained unaware of the extraordinary challenges and opportunities that lay ahead in her military career. 6 months after leaving's training facility, Sarah found herself at the Mountain Warfare Training Center in California, participating in the military's most challenging sniper course. The program was designed for seasoned operators with multiple combat deployments, yet Sarah had earned her place through demonstrated ability rather than time in service. Her instructor was Colonel James Mitchell, a man whose reputation preceded him throughout the special operations community. Mitchell had served as a sniper in 3 different war zones and was known for his exacting standards and ability to identify potential in even the most experienced marksmen. Mitchell said as he reviewed her file on her first day, "Your background is unusual. Most students here have years of combat experience. You have exceptional training scores but no operational deployment. That creates an interesting dynamic." Sarah stood at attention, aware that her fellow students were watching her carefully. The other 11 participants in the course were all senior enlisted personnel or officers with extensive field experience. She was not only the youngest, but also the only one without combat deployment on her record. "I understand the situation, sir," Sarah replied. "I'm here to learn and prove myself worthy of the training opportunity." Mitchell nodded approvingly. "Good attitude. This course will test more than your shooting ability. We evaluate judgment, decision-making under pressure, and ethical reasoning. Technical skill alone doesn't make someone suitable for the responsibilities we're discussing." Over the first week, Sarah demonstrated the exceptional marksmanship abilities that had brought her to Mitchell's attention. She consistently outperformed her more experienced colleagues in technical shooting exercises, showing remarkable precision at extreme ranges and in challenging conditions. However, the course was designed to test more than technical proficiency. Students faced complex scenarios requiring split-second decisions about when to shoot, when to hold fire, and how to balance mission requirements with rules of engagement and ethical considerations. During one particularly challenging exercise, students were presented with a hostage scenario involving multiple targets and innocent civilians. Sarah's assigned position required her to engage a specific target while ensuring no harm came to nearby hostages. The shot was technically difficult, requiring precision at 900 yards with limited visibility and time pressure. Through her scope, Sarah identified her target and began calculating the shot parameters. Wind speed, distance, target movement patterns, and background considerations all factored into her decision-making process. But as she prepared to engage, she noticed something that changed everything. One of the supposed hostages was actually reaching for what appeared to be a concealed weapon. Based on movement patterns and positioning, Sarah determined that the individual was likely an additional threat rather than an innocent bystander. However, rules of engagement for the exercise that hostages were not to be engaged under any circumstances. Sarah faced a critical decision: follow the exercise parameters and potentially allow a threat to develop, or trust her assessment and modify her engagement plan to address what she perceived as a more complex threat scenario. She keyed her radio to contact the exercise controller. "Control, Sniper 2. I have eyes on additional threat in hostage group. Request guidance on engagement parameters." The radio remained silent for several seconds. Finally, Mitchell's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Sniper 2, exercise parameters remain unchanged. Engage assigned target only." Sarah returned to her scope and continued observing the scenario. The supposed hostage's behavior became increasingly suspicious, confirming her initial assessment. She realized this might be a test within the test, designed to evaluate her judgment and willingness to think beyond scripted parameters. Making a decision that would define her military career, Sarah engaged her assigned target with a perfect shot, then immediately shifted to the suspicious individual in the hostage group. Her second shot was equally precise, neutralizing what she had correctly identified as a hidden threat. The exercise ended immediately. Sarah was ordered to report to Mitchell's office for debriefing, uncertain whether her decision would be viewed as excellent judgment or failure to follow orders. Mitchell was waiting with two other senior officers when Sarah arrived. Their expressions revealed nothing about their assessment of her performance. "Explain your decision to engage the second target," Mitchell said without preamble. Sarah recounted her observations about the individual's behavior, her assessment of the threat level, and her reasoning for modifying the engagement plan. She acknowledged that she had technically violated exercise parameters, but maintained that the tactical situation required adaptive thinking. One of the senior officers, whom Sarah didn't recognize, leaned forward with interest. "How certain were you about the second target's hostile intent?" "Completely certain, sir," Sarah replied. "Movement patterns, positioning, and concealment behavior all indicated hostile intent. The individual was preparing to engage friendly forces or harm actual hostages." Mitchell exchanged glances with his colleagues before speaking. That individual was indeed a role player acting as a hidden threat. The exercise was designed to test whether students would recognize threats beyond their assigned parameters and whether they would have the judgment and courage to act on their assessments. Sarah felt relief wash over her, though she maintained her professional composure. "However," Mitchell continued, "your performance raises important questions about operational independence and adherence to command structure. In real-world situations, the ability to think independently can save lives, but military operations require discipline and adherence to established protocols." The unknown senior officer introduced himself as General Robert Harrison, commander of Special Operations Training Programs. His presence indicated that Sarah's performance was being evaluated at the highest levels. "Miss," General Harrison said, "your technical abilities are extraordinary. Your tactical judgment appears equally impressive. But I'm curious about your long-term goals and understanding of the responsibilities that come with advanced sniper qualifications." Sarah considered her response carefully. "Sir, my goal is to serve effectively and protect American lives. I understand that advanced marksmanship skills create significant responsibility for making life-and-death decisions. I take that responsibility seriously and am committed to using these abilities ethically and in service to my country and fellow service members." General Harrison nodded approvingly. "Your grandfather would be proud of that answer. Yes, I knew Thomas. We served together briefly in the early days of Special Operations development. He was not only an exceptional marksman, but a man of unshakable integrity." Over the following weeks, Sarah's performance continued to exceed expectations. She completed every technical challenge successfully while demonstrating the judgment and ethical reasoning that her instructors sought. Her fellow students, initially skeptical of her youth and inexperience, came to respect her abilities and character. On the final day of the course, Sarah faced the ultimate test. She was positioned 1,800 yards from a complex target scenario involving multiple buildings, moving targets, and strict rules of engagement. The shot requirements pushed the limits of equipment and human capability. Colonel Mitchell observed through his spotting scope as Sarah prepared for what would be the longest precision shot of her military career. Environmental conditions were challenging, with variable winds and temperature gradients affecting bullet flight over the extreme distance. Sarah spent 20 minutes studying conditions, calculating variables, and preparing her equipment. When she finally settled into position behind her rifle, her movements were calm and deliberate despite the pressure of final evaluation. The first shot was perfect, striking a target at 1,650 yards with devastating precision. The second shot, at the full 1,800-yard distance, was even more impressive. Sarah had not only met the technical requirements, but had done so with a level of precision that amazed even her experienced instructors. As Sarah cleared her rifle and prepared to leave her position, Colonel Mitchell approached with a small leather case. Inside was a badge that few people ever earned. the Army's expert sniper badge, reserved for marksmen who demonstrated exceptional ability, judgment, and character. "Congratulations, Sergeant," Mitchell said as he pinned the badge to her uniform. "You've earned this through exceptional performance and demonstrated the qualities we seek in our most trusted marksmen." But Mitchell wasn't finished. "There's something else. General Harrison has approved your assignment to a specialized unit conducting advanced marksmanship research and training. You'll be working with experimental equipment, developing new techniques, and training other elite marksmen." As Sarah stood there with her newly earned badge, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From her grandfather's patient instruction on a Montana farm to earning the military's highest marksmanship recognition, every step had prepared her for the responsibilities she now carried. Her first instructor had been invited to attend the graduation ceremony. As he watched Sarah receive her badge, he remembered the young recruit who had impressed him with her dedication and mysterious abilities. Seeing her achieve such recognition validated his decision to recommend her for advanced training. "You knew, didn't you?" asked Master Sergeant Hayes, who stood beside him watching the ceremony. "You knew she was special from the beginning." Hayes smiled. "I knew she had exceptional potential, but even I didn't anticipate just how far that potential would take her. Thomas' legacy lives on in very capable hands." As the ceremony concluded, Sarah approached with a smile that showed both gratitude and determination. "Thank you, Sergeant. Your training and belief in my abilities made all of this possible." Shook his head. "You earned this through your own dedication and character. Your grandfather would be proud, and you've honored his memory through your service." Sarah looked down at her expert sniper badge, thinking about the responsibilities it represented and the opportunities it would create. She understood that this achievement was not an ending but a beginning. The skills her grandfather had taught her, combined with the military's advanced training, had prepared her for challenges she couldn't yet imagine. In the months and years ahead, Sergeant Sarah would use her extraordinary abilities to train other marksmen, develop new techniques, and serve her country with the same dedication and integrity that had defined her grandfather's career. The .50 that had first revealed her exceptional abilities had been just the beginning of a military career that would establish her as one of the finest marksmen of her generation. Watched Sarah drive away toward her new assignment, knowing he had witnessed the emergence of a true professional whose abilities and character would serve the military and her country for years to come. The young recruit who had once impressed him with her mysterious skills had become exactly what the military needed: a marksman of exceptional ability guided by unshakable principles and unwavering dedication to service.